for quality the way he did the Tonight Show. I mean, I loved Jay Leno too, and Letterman, and the late night guys, but Johnny had a special genius. He was nice to children and nice to old ladies, and he still had a little bit of a highbrow tone to the show, in that he had authors and book writers and things like that.
And you know, you say that he had a special genius. Tell us, what was that really all about?
Well, he could get more laughs with one look.
Yes, that's what I was talking about, that the expressions.
Well, he was just simply a born comic. And let's face it, he started in show business very young as a magician, and he never gave up his love of magic. He loved to throw it in whenever he could. And what he did was pure magic when it comes to comedy.
Tell us how he has really paved the way for others and set the standard for comedians today, even though we acknowledge that he's really in a class by himself.
He's what?
Tell us how he's set the standard and really paved the way for late-night comedians, even though he's in a class all by himself.
Oh, well, the thing is, when he had show, it was still a discovery show for new talent. You don't see much new talent shown off on the late-night shows now. It was still an open market there, which I like, because it was a fine place for new comics to get a little exposure and get known. But he had more of an open door than there is now.
Yeah, you know, it's funny that you should say that, because as you were talking, I'm thinking he was very generous, whereas today it's kind of very much all about that particular person who's hosting the show.
Oh, that's right. And I miss that old openness. And he was, in other words, as you say, the word is generous. Sometimes I wonder if they don't want competition. And I always love to see new people given a chance.
Yeah, and when we think about that, I mean, you see over the years, I mean, Letterman obviously was on there, Leno, just so many people.
Well, they all owed him.
They absolutely do. You know, it's interesting because he went on the air with the show in '62 before I was born. And a lot of times when comedians stay on the air for quite a long time, 30 years as he did, they grow stale. But I have to tell you that in the '80s and the '90s, I started watching him and he was hysterical. For my generation, he was very
you
funny.
Know why? He was the last word. I mean, he kept up to date and ahead. I mean, how many people do you know, if they're going to travel in Russia, learn Russian?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to travel in France, he learned France. If he's going to go to India, he learns there. I mean, right away you begin to understand that he was a genius in many ways and in many fields, and a hard worker. Another thing, he entered into the very texture of the show always. In other words, he worked out and kept himself in top physical condition so that he could physical things. And you know, people forget that.
And you know, Miss Diller, I don't want to forget the point that you are a friend of he was like in his personal life.
Well, he was. I totally understand his wanting to be alone and not deal with people and a lot of public, because he was so saturated with, and that's why he loved to go to France, because he really wasn't known in France, and he could walk down the street without being accosted.
So this very popular man craved anonymity when he wasn't working.
In a way, he craved a little rest and peace and quiet. Anonymity, he could only find it in certain countries, of course.
Any experiences from working with him that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I felt that we had a sort of a little inside, funny little rapport, because he used to confide in me things that were never made public, and I was very proud of that. And I will never forget one time in particular when we worked together so well, where he just kept feeding me the proper things to make it work. Again, here we have comic generosity.
Absolutely. Phyllis Diller, comedian and legend in her own right. We thank you so much for your thoughts about the passing of Johnny Carson. And we're looking at aerials right now, live pictures out of California of Johnny Carson's home, the last home I believe that he lived in, as we wait for word and reaction out of California. The Hollywood residents are just waking up now and learning of this very sad news that Johnny Carson has passed at the age of 79 from emphysema, and we're looking again at a live picture of his home in California, his Malibu home.
He dominated late night for 30 years, and he made a lot of careers. He also, I guess you could say, saved some careers, including that of a guy who went on to become President of the United States. You may recall this back in 1988. Bill Clinton delivered the nominating speech for Michael Dukakis at the Democratic Convention, and he went way too long. People kind of started booing and chanting for him to get off the podium, and it was just a mess for Bill Clinton, and many people said that was the end of his presidential aspirations. Well, the next night, he appears on Johnny Carson's program, and with self-deprecating jokes and, you know, playing a little bit of his saxophone with Doc Severinsen, he resurrected his career. In fact, one network said that was the fastest turnaround in political history. And as Jerry Lewis, who was with us a short time ago, said, you know, if Johnny liked you, the audience liked you. And that night it was clear Johnny liked Bill Clinton, who went on to become president of the United States. Well, if you're that powerful as Johnny Carson was, you need a few lawyers in your back pocket, and one of them was our own correspondent Jamie Colby, also a lawyer who was an attorney for The Tonight Show for several years. She joins us now on the telephone. Jamie, what was he like?
You know, the one thing I can tell you, Greg, is that he was just like all of us, and he, in his head, believed that he was like all of us. And so while you saw that bigger-than-life image on screen, someone who could make you laugh, as you were saying earlier, just by an expression, deep down inside, he was laughing with us. And he gave so many people a chance, not only at the time that I was the attorney for The Tonight Show and working with Carson Productions. You remember the Big Chill, and he had so many things going on, Johnny. He was giving David Letterman a chance. It was like Dave, you know, at The Tonight Show, and he at that point wasn't really that known, and he gave me a chance, too. Imagine, Greg, you know, graduating from law school and your first job is working for Johnny Carson and The Tonight Show. And just getting to know him as a person, I'm so sad to hear this news. He was, no doubt, a chain smoker. He was someone, though, that worked so hard to be physically fit. He was an incredible tennis player, someone that worked out religiously, someone that lived a good life, and someone who made all of us laugh. He definitely set the standard, and it was such a privilege to work with him and to know him. And I can tell you things like he would always know the names of my secretary and her children. You know, he didn't have to come into the office and be that down to earth, but he was. Yet at the same time, he was incredibly nervous and shy off camera, overly shy. But when the camera lit up, it was magic, and I was there almost every night at The Tonight Show to see him entertain us and to make guests feel welcome. At the time, David Letterman and Bill Cosby were regulars, and then giving a chance to Joan Rivers, you know, to be the permanent guest host. That was the era that I was there, and I'm so sad to hear the news. You know, I'm on my way to do some storm coverage, and I'm really sad to hear this because there will never be another Johnny.
Yeah, he had no enemies, I think it's fair to say, only admirers and friends. He was so beloved. But you were in the workplace with him. He seemed to make it look so easy, but I suspect there was a lot of work that went into it. Talk to us about his sort of work habits when he would come in. I know that he had a fairly large staff that assisted him with some of his jokes, but I also am understanding that he came up with a lot of his own quips.
And, you know, at the same time that he had a large staff, he had a very small group of people that he trusted. At the time, the attorney, Henry Bushkin, that I worked with, the bombastic Bushkin, as Johnny used to joke, was one of his trusted people. Freddie DeCordova, who was the producer of the show, was someone that Johnny held very near and dear at the time. And there was a staff of writers, you know, Peter LaSalle and other people that he really relied on. But he was a brilliant businessman, and at the time he was expanding into multiple picture deals, one of which was The Big Chill. He was working on other projects, station ownership. He saw the big picture, Greg, but his